This is a Meeseeks box. Let me show you how it works. You press this. You make a request. Mr. Meeseeks, open Jerry's stupid mayonnaise jar.
Yes, sirree!
The Meeseeks fulfills the request.
Wow!
And then it stops existing.
What the is going on?
Welcome to Sonic Bytes, the freewheeling conversation and interview series for the eclectic music lover. This week, we talk about when artists go outside the box and defy the expectations of what people previously perceived as conventional. From the complex harmony of Jacob Collier and the obscure lyrics to Oasis' Champagne Supernova to John Coltrane's A Love Supreme and Nickelback's hypothetical Reggaeton album, we discuss the limitations of musical style and whether it is possible for artists to go too far when pushing their boundaries. We hope you enjoy it. I think an interesting point actually might be the Taylor Swift album that came out last Friday. I know you stayed up to listen to it, didn't you?
I didn't, no. It came out at maybe like 4 or 5 a.m. in the UK.
Ah, right, okay.
So, yeah, I woke up and listened to it.
Yeah, but I did the same on Friday.
You think that went too far? Is that, or is
no,
that just
no,
another
no.
thing?
I think it defied my expectations, at least, of what I was kind of expecting, or what at least what I come to expect from Taylor Swift. And I think it was interesting in that sort of the first, I don't know how you found it, the first 8 tracks for me didn't really hit me all that hard as I was listening to them, but then the second 8 I really got into it and I really enjoyed it and it was really, really good. But I think it was almost because I was, from what I've come to know Taylor Swift as, producing what some might call kind of manufactured factory pop music, which isn't a bad thing if that's what you're trying to do. It was the first 8 tracks almost like a palate cleanser to kind of take away that expectation that I had of her. And then when it was cleansed, when the second 8 came in, I was kind of listening to it with a slightly more open mind, I guess.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of like a reverse shock, you know? Whereas when she dropped the first few singles for Reputation, and it was, what were they called, like Look What You Made Me Do, or like Ready or Not,
yeah.
And it was like, okay, this is like pure pop. And I guess this is, it's sort of the other way around when you put on track 1, The One, for the first time, and you're like, okay, this is the National. And you're prepared for that because maybe as a fan, or you're expecting it, you've been reading about the different producers on the record and things like that.
I think, yeah.
But I guess that's it's an expectation thing and then a shock thing. But
I guess it's like a fan versus a casual listener thing as well. Because I would say that I'm not like a fan of Taylor Swift, but a casual consumer of it. I listen to new stuff when it comes out, but I don't follow everything she does. So to me, it took me as a surprise to have it so toned down and so mellow and so much more relaxed than what I've been used to hearing and kind of expecting from her as well.
Yeah, I feel like so much of being a fan and just judging music, like you're so swayed by and you're so influenced by how close you are with the artist and how much you know about the artist. And it's, I don't know. I mean, obviously music is subjective and it's up to anyone's interpretation. And should it be put up to a pedestal where everyone should be appreciating all this type of, like, you choose whatever music you want to listen to, however complex, however simple, however poppy, however characteristic it is of whatever aesthetic it is coming from. And yeah, I guess the Taylor Swift album is a good example of that. I'm part of a lot of sort of the national fan forums. There's a Facebook group. There's like Reddit forums, and there's everything else on Twitter and everything. And I think a lot of people were also very confused at the beginning. They were like, "What? I never thought I'd like." They'd sort of like written off Taylor Swift. And I wasn't a massive fan of Reputation. And even though when 1989 came out, because she went on sort of like a Spotify war, or a war against streaming, where she's trying to fight for Spotify to pay artists more per stream, and so she just boycotted all streaming services, I think. So as a result, I never got around to listening to that album that much, even though a lot of people think that's her best album.
So I guess as a fan, do you think Taylor Swift went too far with this album or not? And do you think...
Well...
Go on.
It's interesting. I've been reading a lot of positive things about the album in terms of, I guess, reviews, and I have some friends that really dig it in terms of they're massive fans of The National or they're massive Taylor Swift fans who are really into that aesthetic. But then I also read it. I heard a criticism yesterday of the album that it's kind of a bit too much like Lana Del Rey. A lot of the tracks that was quite it was by Anthony Fantano, of course. I follow him religiously, but it was actually a much more positive review than I thought it would be. He gave it a 7 out of 10. Spoiler alert! Sorry if anyone's looking at his reviews. But he...
Sorry, Anthony. We've stolen 20 viewers from your from your videos.
Yeah, all of our viewers have gone to him.
Yeah.
But he was saying how some of the tracks were just so Lana Del Rey. And he couldn't listen to it not couldn't listen to it. He just couldn't see past it. And maybe she went too far into that aesthetic. Maybe it's a good thing if you're a massive Lana Del Rey fan, if you're into that sort of I guess, sort of sad but Californian sounding vibe. That Jack Antonoff produced vibe.
Yeah. The sad Californian vibe.
Yeah, but then he also dug a lot of the other songs and the songwriting and all that. So I thought it was quite a balanced review, and it did address one of what he saw as a problem with the album, which it was sort of taking too much from another style, which is probably another sort of topic in itself. How music borrows from, how far can you borrow from another genre.
Before you kind of lose whatever it was that
before
you were...
it becomes before it becomes a copy,
Yeah, exactly. I think going into a different style, it's difficult, isn't it? Because it speaks to the whole selling out versus artistic growth sort of argument as well. That you as an artist, I think there's a certain level of responsibility at a certain point I think you almost have to your fans in one respect, that your fans expect you to be a certain thing. And so there's a temptation and a pressure to keep producing that sort of music. But then eventually you obviously then if you keep making that sort of music, then you then become known for only that. I'm trying to think of someone like, I know it's not really comparable to someone like Taylor Swift, who is a pop star, but someone like B.B. King, for example, who played blues his entire life and was known for nothing else, really. I know there's that one video on YouTube where he plays a Mastodon cover, but mostly
Wait, what? I've never seen that.
Oh, mate, I've got some things to send you in that case.
Oh my goodness.
It's amazing.
That's so random.
But that's the exception, that most of the time he's known for playing blues music.
Sure.
And so I think, and as a result, if blues music is no longer pop, I know pop music is heavily influenced by blues music, but it's out and out blues isn't really something that's popular anymore, at least in terms of the mainstream sort of pop stars don't play the blues in the same way as they used to.
Yeah. I guess, and those blues artists, they're not like constantly evolving or anything,
No,
or even
exactly.
just guitarists in general. Like, I guess, like people, I'm thinking of people like Joe Bonamassa or something, or
he's
like
a really good example.
Joe Satriani or something like that. In terms of, I guess there is sort of limits to the genres that they sort of box themselves into.
And so on one hand you have that responsibility to the people who like you for what you do. If you're famous for making manufactured pop music, then people are going to expect you to keep doing that. But at the same time, if you feel like you've done everything you can in that particular genre and you want to do something else, then there's the whole risk of alienation. You betray the trust that the fans have put in you, but at the same time, there's the chance of getting new fans, and there's moving in another direction, doing something that you might just be interested in. I know that obviously I don't pretend to know exactly how record companies work, but I know obviously they have they often sign multi-album deals where if you at some point, if you basically fulfill the criteria of the contract, they basically just say, okay, we can do what you want now. And so
I guess in a very traditional record deal, there's a lot of different ways to do it now, but
so there's greater room for sort of artistic exploration, and so I think it's interesting in that you could say you can almost you can go too far in the sense of you can go too far away from what you were originally known for, but then at the same time that then diversifies what you do, and then I know that, say, for example, sort of pop and the national stuff, they're not poles apart, but if you were to imagine it on a spectrum of like Look What You Made Me Do versus Mirrorball that came out on this album, like if you have that as a spectrum of your artistic output, then everything else in the middle then becomes kind of acceptable, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, acceptable or
not acceptable, but like it's not a surprise. I'm thinking, like, to take another example.
I guess it's not like a bind. It's like a sort of there's different vectors.
Oh yeah, of course. They're going. I'm just to boil it down to something really simple, like, or like, say like John Mayer's kind of like Who Did You Think I Was versus Wildfire. Like a solid blues tune versus a country tune, but then like everything in between blues and country is then it's then a point for discussion, sort of like how far it lives along that spectrum. And then obviously you can have pop, reggae, rock. You can have so many different genres that you go into, and then people can nothing's then, it becomes less surprising when you do stuff that's more interesting. Or sorry, not more interesting, but that's of a different genre, musically at least.
Yeah, and it serves different artists differently. I mean, in rock music, you have people like Iron Maiden and Metallica who have pretty much stayed consistent to their sound. Maybe occasionally they add an orchestra or something, but to orchestrify their tunes. But
that's a whole other thing, like adding. I don't know if you've noticed that, but like when bands play like the Albert Hall, it adds like a weird legitimacy to their music, and then all of a sudden, like songs that were played, like as like a 3-band piece, thinking something like The Who, and then you add an orchestra to it, and then like it's almost like it has this weird sort of decadence to it all of a sudden.
It almost like you don't expect it to come from. I mean, you can see the lineage of how you got to the band from an orchestra, but somehow it is different.
There's a weird sort of like a weird sort of nostalgia towards it, kind of thing. Like, oh, I remember when The Who used to do this, and like we're gonna add that nostalgia by adding a classical orchestra over it. And it's like
which
is
never part of your past,
Yeah, it's like almost like a kind of rewriting of history, but like and it adds a weird like sophistication to the music as well, I suppose, as if like, I don't know, like people are trying to make it more highbrow by adding a classical symphony to it.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, that is maybe a possible potential way for someone to go too far.
Yeah.
If I was going to take a band, like, I'm just going to go with Rage Against the Machine again, or just a random band like Toto or something. if they played with like the San Francisco Symphony the same way Metallica did, then that's just a bit overkill, There's it's almost so beyond the expectation that it doesn't add value to the music. So maybe, I mean, whatever value is. I mean,
and whatever
not to get too deep and philosophical, but maybe that's where we need to go. But
I guess whatever expectation is as well, because like
expectation. I mean, it comes back to that whole idea of expectation, I think. Right.
I think I guess expectation has a lot to do with defining where you can go too far, because if you have an expectation of an artist to do something and then they do something different, or they go too far in a certain direction, it's your expectation of what they were going to do that defines that. Because if you're a super fan of something, like, I mean, I am a diehard Nickelback fan, as an example, and anything Nickelback put out, I'm kind of sold on it already. So like, even if it's critically not very well received, I will happily listen to it anyway, because like my expectation isn't necessarily of them to do anything. Like whatever it is, I don't. It's not that I have a low expectation of them, but I don't have an expectation of them to do anything that I'm not necessarily going to be on board with.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
And I guess at this point, if Nickelback, I mean, unless Nickelback just went down a complete like, okay, Nickelback going to do a reggaeton album or something, then that would be a bit like, you know. That's going too far, you know.
In one sense, yes, but in another sense, I think like it's almost not that it's a circle, but like if you were to go too far and then like come back again, it's like it's so far gone from what Nickelback would do that if they brought out reggaeton, like I think a lot of people would just generally be curious and you'd listen to it just out of like, did they really like you almost to make sure you weren't hallucinating? Like, did they really bring out a reggaeton album?
Yeah,
like I have to see what this sounds like.
Yeah, and just to draw back, that's literally the same thing that happened to that Taylor Swift album. No one, I mean, maybe some diehard fans would have known that she was a National fan or whatever, or the National were fans of Taylor Swift, but no one expected, like literally, not even the National expected that. And then suddenly, all these people, like all these National fans, they've like written Taylor Swift off. I mean, we've already addressed that point. But it's the same thing if Nickelback went reggaeton, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Just say the thought and see.
Yeah. Nickelback, if you are listening and want to bring out a reggaeton album, I support you wholeheartedly, and I will whatever donations I can give to your crowdfunding page.
Oh dear, I don't think they need a crowdfunding page to make a reggaeton album. Like, come on.
But like, if they put out like, sorry, go on.
No, I was gonna say with all bands, you can do that, like in terms of what you expect someone to do next and whether it's supposed to break any boundaries or not. Because everything borrows from everything.
Yes.
Like if okay, we're gonna go back to Nickelback again, but if Nickelback put out a reggaeton album, they're literally borrowing things from reggaeton. Or if they were suddenly gonna get an influence, okay, let's say something that's closer to the heart. Say they're gonna go for like a more of a punky sound or something.
Yeah.
Then you're still borrowing, and I guess the expectation shifts in that way, you know. What comes next, and how, what are you judging it? What lens are you judging it by?
Yeah.
Are you judging it through the quality of the music, or just the surprise, or the complexity, it's just hard to. It's hard to how do I find the words to say? I mean, I don't want to say it's like it's hard for one person to judge, but again, because that's a bit too relative. But yeah,
I think it's got to be so difficult for. I mean, it's difficult not difficult, but it's interesting in two ways, because I think as an artist, if you bring out something that's very successful, you have like it's a difficult crossroads to go down, isn't it? Because you have like, that worked. Do I do more of the same? And hope that people don't say that that pigeonhole me as the person who does that thing. I'm thinking someone like Coldplay, for example. No, sorry, that's not a good example. Maroon 5, they brought out songs about Jane. Do we do more of that kind of stuff? Sort of the, I don't know, the best way to describe it, sort of early 2000s pop music, where like a full band is still kind of like the sound. Do we do more of that, or do we try and stay relevant and go with go into sort of more electronic music and sort of stick with what sounds popular and do that instead, and sort of risk alienating the people who really liked songs about Jane, but then at the same time we then get, you have the chance of getting new people who will like the next album you bring out, and so on and so forth. And so like, I think it's an interesting way of getting new fans, but it's also the whole risk of alienating them as well. I'm just trying. I think the
sirens.
They've come to get me. They finally found out where I live.
They're tracking down the Nickelback fans.
Yeah. It's against the law in Medway, in the UK, if you didn't know, to talk about Nickelback and reggaeton in the same sentence. And so they've found out the bug in the lines and everything.
Yeah, especially not into a mic outside facing the street.
Yeah, exactly.
With an open window.
You're just asking for trouble, aren't you? Clearly. But yeah, I think another thing that's kind of interesting because obviously you talk about so the Taylor Swift thing is kind of, it's more musical taste and sort of more musical
Style.
Style and genre. But I think there are other ways that you can sort of push the envelope and go too far as well, which I think are a little bit more kind of not concrete, but a lot more noticeable, if that makes sense. I'm just thinking of like in terms of something rhythmical. I know that Dream Theater do. There's that great video on YouTube where they do. I think is it Dance of Eternity?
Yeah, that's
where
the
it's
one.
Where there are so many time signatures. There's a guy like he's holding up like
love
time
that
signature
video.
cards, and he's like flicking through them because they go in so many
Like,
different time
1, 2, 3,
signatures.
4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. If you haven't checked that out before, search up Dance of Eternity, Mike Portnoy, time signature, counting. Any combination of those words. You
Check
should
it out.
find
It's hilarious and also extremely impressive as well.
Yeah. I mean,
but
that Dream Theater is a very interesting example. Now you brought it up. Sorry, I'm just going to cut right in.
No, please, go on.
But I'm just going to go over the point that whole genre is called progressive rock and metal. And what does that mean?
Yeah.
Like I guess maybe when those prog bands were coming out initially, people like Rush or whatever, or Pink Floyd or whatever. I guess like they would try and experiment with different time signatures or try and push the expectations of rock are, and then they become progressive. And now prog is sort of its own style. Like you have prog that sort of fits the bill as prog music, and people are looking for like specifically prog music. But then prog just becomes sort of like not a buzzword, but it just becomes its own style. Whereas it initially came out of something being progressive. So I mean, progressive. If you're literally thinking about the definition of progressive, then you can think of things like harmonic, like people pushing the harmonic boundaries of what we know as Western harmony or whatever.
Yeah. Jacob Collier as an example, perhaps.
Yeah. But at the same time, you could also be pushing the boundaries of. It's all about pushing the boundaries, right? Pushing the boundaries of what your instrument can do. Like when the electric guitar became, when they pushed their tubes far enough. I think you can enunciate this better. But when they discovered overdrive, then that's like a whole new sound that suddenly. I think you were talking to me about this the other day about.
Oh, about
it was
it
from that
being
Burn
like,
book. Yeah, about how you make a new sound and then it just becomes its own thing and then you run with that.
Yeah, definitely. So
and are people trying to push to is not going? I guess going too far is such a weird way to put it, but
it is, isn't it?
But is making the overdriven guitar going too far in that context? But then now it just has become like a staple of everything we listen to.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? I think as well in terms of like pushing stuff. If you push the envelope, so to speak, and you go too far, then all you've done is move the envelope to a point where everyone else can then sort of move to. Sorry, to sort of expand on the point that you mentioned, David Byrne. Johnny lent me How Music Works by David Byrne, the updated version. So this is how music works now. It's not how music worked before, but it's how it works now. He keeps updating
how it worked at that moment that he published the book.
All the people who bought the first version must be really annoyed because this is not how music works anymore. Then is this how music works?
David Byrne hadn't listened to 100 Gex yet, you know.
Yeah, exactly. But like he basically talks about certain the advent of technology into music and the use of amplification created instruments that were devoid of any cultural baggage, I suppose. So if you think about something like a piano, a classical piano, I have one here in fact, it plays in semitones, it plays in equal temperament, so every octave the frequency doubles exactly, and all the notes are a 1/12 of an octave between, and it's designed specifically to play. It's a Western instrument. And it's designed to play Western scales, but it wouldn't play, say, like gamelan music very well or anything like that, where the scales are the semitones are microtonality is something that's a part of it. Whereas
getting into a nerdy zone.
Sorry, I'll try and
but
I'll try and
in a good
explain
way.
it as much
just warn
as much as possible for the Yeah, word of warning. Sorry, it's a lot of musical content, but in terms of the reason certain music sounds like it's Western versus Eastern, for example, is the scales that are used and the microtonality that's used in some that aren't used in others. Indian ragas is another example, but basically he said that if you have something like a theremin that was invented, I don't want to guess the year, I think it was in the 1950s, it might be earlier.
Who knows?
But I'll Google that in a minute. It makes a sound that it's completely devoid of any sort of cultural baggage. It literally just makes a perfect sliding everything, and it doesn't sound like it's imitating a piano, a violin, any of the classical instruments before it. It's not even really imitating a voice, and so you have this thing now that you can then push the envelope with, and you can make sounds that were hitherto unmakeable. A good example that it gets used in Good Vibrations, isn't it, by the Beach Boys, sort of over the top of the main melody.
It's interesting that way, how a theremin breaks the boundaries in that way, whereas with stringed instruments you almost have the reverse, because you have string instruments where it's like you can slide to whatever tone you want, to whatever interval you want, if you know how to listen for that thing. But then people then added frets to their guitars and basses, and
that's a really good point, actually.
And now that's in sort of what they call equal temperament. Equal temperament, is that the one where on the piano?
Equal is where there's an exact calculated difference between each one of the notes, and it's always the same, as opposed to it's natural temperament, or
piano temperament, whatever that is.
Equal temperament.
But yeah, it's almost went the other way around, which is quite interesting. But then you create new styles out of that as well.
Yeah, exactly. But to the point, I suppose, that like once you start, if we run with the theremin idea, once the theremin is introduced to the ear of the listener, you recognise what it is, and then the boundary has been pushed. So then once you have a theremin in a song and it makes that sound, then you have to find another way of using the theremin in a way that you hadn't used it before, in order to push the boundary again. And I think another thing that might be, I know it's a bit of a jump in terms of topic, but like the electric guitar is something similar. That obviously, as you said before, like the overdriven sound where you're literally cranking it to the point where it's overdriven, you're going too far, has now become accepted. You have like sort of the warm fuzzy overdrive that you kind of expect to hear now, but people then push it further and further and further, to the point where you have distortion, and distortion gets darker and darker and more coloured, to push the envelope further each time. And so it's almost like in order to keep going too far, you have to keep doing stuff that's that sounds more and more sort of surprising or unexpected to the ear of the listener.
Yeah, and it's so at what point are you going too far? I think that's just the question, like harmonically, if you're finding new chords, if you're finding new crazy rhythms. I think there's been an explosion in recent music of this whole feel called like quintuplet swing.
Yeah.
So maybe that's like not a new thing, but a thing that's become very popular. Which maybe comes out of that whole sort of D'Angelo thing. I think D'Angelo was also quite a shifter in terms of not having everything. So when Voodoo came out in 2000, that was a groundbreaking album for rhythm because everything was off. I think apparently Eric Clapton listened to it, and he just laughed because everything was. I think that's the story, but he just laughed because everything was just off. Like the kick didn't line up with anything.
Yeah.
But it's still like it grooved. It grooved
still
like
grooves,
nothing
isn't
else.
it?
And that quintuplet swing is that whole thing. You split a beat into 5, or 2 beats into 5, and then you sort of imply it, but it doesn't have to be mathematically like 6.
1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2.
Yeah, you can play around within those parameters of the 3 and the 2.
Yeah.
And this is my bad visual representation of quintuplet swing, but yeah, you can shift it around and make that feel differently. I guess that's not really going too far. It's sort of just playing around with different concepts that break the boundaries of what you expect.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Like your expectations have to be constantly subverted or sort of pushed in order for someone to kind of, at least in terms of pushing the boundaries, go too far. But I guess,
but when is it too far? When is it like you're doing something like no one expected someone to make the overdriven guitar. People just wanted louder music, and it was like, oh crap, now we've got Hendrix.
What have we done?
But yeah, it's.
I guess maybe
because okay. So my argument right now in this current moment that I'm making up on the spot is that it's completely just to do with the audience's expectation, but it's beyond the average listener's expectation.
I think that's a really good way of putting it.
So if you can't comprehend Jacob Collier's melody and you find him annoying, or harmonies annoying, and it's just you can't comprehend it, like, not maybe comprehend's the wrong word, but you just dislike it because it's different.
Yeah.
You know?
But then again, I guess I could counter that and say that if the intention of the person writing it, so Jacob Collier, is not necessarily to be comprehensible, you know, it's written in order to fulfill another purpose than that, then, like, if you're saying it's going too far, are you then missing the point of what he's doing?
Yeah, and he's tried to address that. I feel like he does experiment with harmony with the intention of conveying a feeling, which is the whole point of music, really.
Yeah.
And so he does try to contextualize, like, okay, I'm gonna do this crazy substitution thing. I'm gonna stack this chord and this chord, and I'm gonna sing this note, and it's gonna make me feel like I'm in a garden or something, and or weird things like that. And he's almost trying to. He's almost like gone to. You can see him going too far, and he's just pulling it back a bit to be like, "Hey, this is comprehensible. This is what I'm thinking about. This is my intention. You can interpret it whatever way you want, but this was my intention of when I challenged the boundary." And you almost sort of have to do that, I guess, if you're trying to make a living as an artist at the same time as you're innovating. Like, you can't, rather than just be an absolute snob, create this like amazing new thing and then be like, no one else can have it because I'm the only person that can understand this. You know, like at this,
exactly.
It has to reach some sort of market.
Yes. But again, I guess like you can keep going down, can't you? Because obviously, like, you can make music that's not necessarily for a market. You know, some people just make music for themselves, and then if they're going too far, like, who can say? Because no one else has heard it, kind of thing. But I think you're right. Like, generally speaking, I think the not the conventional wisdom, but I think when people say someone has gone too far in a particular way, it's normally because it defies, you know, the majority, the expectations of the majority of the populace, or the majority of the people listening to that piece of music, in one way or another, you know.
Yeah, I think it might be interesting for us to just roll off some artists that we think have tried to go too far.
Well, I actually
and maybe did and are now in hindsight sort of legends. Or seen as innovators. I guess that's how you recategorize these people. Because people like I was watching a John Coltrane documentary last week on Netflix called Chasing Train. I think you should try and watch that as well. It's not very jazzy. It's jazz. I mean, jazzy in the sense. Sorry, that's a really bad way. It's really bad way to. Yeah, as you can see, I'm not a promoter or or someone that makes film trailers, but it's all about jazz. But it's not like in a way that, like, it's in a very digestible.
Not in a way that alienates
market.
the casual listener, kind of thing.
Yeah, it goes into his life, goes into his intentions for making the music. And when they made A Love Supreme, which is sort of his landmark album, he's had many hit albums, but A Love Supreme was his sort of defining innovator. It sort of encapsulated the whole point of his career, which ended too early because of liver cancer, I think. Like, what came out, he was almost like John Coltrane's almost like he's such a legend because he really pushed the boundaries of what a saxophone could do and what saxophone could play and how fast you could play, how hard you can play, how dissonant while staying within the boundaries of jazz. He almost he just got so mad, like he was trying to find he was just trying to find another level of existence. And that's how hard he was going, how hard he was trying to push the boundary and go too far. And a lot of people just dismissed A Love Supreme as just Supreme in his Supreme.
Dana Ross in the Suprimes.
But yeah, a lot of people just dismissed it as noise. But people that knew him, that worked on the record with him, were like, "This is like, the next.
This is it.
This is the thing.
This is it."
Almost to the point that people like, I think people even like worship John Coltrane. It's like a church of John Coltrane.
The church of
people
Coltrane.
People go so far. Like he was a. Like you think Justin, like it's like sort of Justin Bieber type fandom, but John Coltrane. It's a great documentary. I recommend it to anyone, no matter if you're into jazz or not. Just his life, because he seemed like a great guy.
Would there be Love Suprimers, the equivalent of Beliebers?
Yeah, I guess. Love
Suprimers. All living in Australia, it would seem.
Yeah.
Okay. What I did just before this was I came up with like a list of like ways that artists can go too far. So like if I reel a couple of these off, like I wonder if like you can think of any people like this. So like the first one I thought was kind of like like harmonic, like in terms of like using harmony and pushing the boundaries of harmony. Like, is there anyone that you think has kind of gone too far, but like is now then revered in the same way? I guess John Coltrane's one, but like have you got any others that kind of like did the same sort of thing and now you look back at it and go sort of like, actually?
I guess a lot of classical composers did that in terms of, some I guess the more modern composers. I'm very much not an expert. I like classical music, but I need to read way more. But I really like listening to Shostakovich, and I think his stuff is sort of pretty out there in terms of harmony.
Definitely.
More recently you have people like Jacob Collier, you have people like Corey Henry. These are musicians, but yeah, they're just sort of pushing their instruments and the tools at their disposal to as far as they can go. In terms of harmony,
also definitely check out Jacob Collier, Corey Henry, and Shostakovich if you guys get a chance as well.
Shostakovich,
Interesting to put those three in the same sentence.
Yeah, I'm trying to think that there have to be some like more rocks artists.
I think
Jimi
Hendrix has got to be up there in terms of. There's one thing I think that he did that was really interesting harmonically, at least, which is the Hendrix Chord. It's named after him now. For anyone who doesn't know what the Hendrix Chord is, it uses it's a major chord, like a dominant chord, but it has a minor third on top, and so it has a major and a minor third, which is an interval of a seventh, and so it sounds really. Sorry, no, it's a sharp 9. Sorry, not a seventh, a major seventh, and it sounds really, really dissonant, but at the same time, it just kind of works, and there's no real musically I can't explain why, but at the same time you hear it and you just sort of it brings out some sort of visceral response, and so it's named after him because I don't know whether he coined it and sort of came up with using it first, but like it's definitely attributed to him, and so I guess as a rock guy he definitely sort of went too far, so to speak, in terms of the harmonic side of things.
And I think there's definitely more like if we're talking about solely harmony, then it's hard to say because there's just you can go down the Jacob Collier route, or you can just sort of stay within traditional harmony, and it's like there's no obligation for you to have to challenge harmonic boundaries either. If you're trying to reach a certain feeling, then you don't necessarily have to do that in order to reach new feelings,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so it's one of those things, and a lot of people aren't looking for that type of thing. So it's like no one really looked for Hendrix at the time.
No, definitely
And
not.
so,
It just came out of came out of nowhere.
yeah, did you?
I guess
other... Sorry, you go.
Yes, I did. I was going to say another one that we sort of mentioned a couple of times is like lyrical, like obscurity, I guess, in one way or another, to the point where like I think, you know, generally speaking, at least for me as a songwriter, when I write lyrics, like I try to make them comprehensible or like to a point where people understand, they can follow the development of an idea in my song. But obviously there are some people that write in a way that doesn't do that, and they don't necessarily make sense. Or like to pick a popular example, the one that always hits me is Champagne Supernova by Oasis.
Okay.
Slowly walking down the hall faster than a cannonball. And like, I think the funny thing about it is that like, I watched this hilarious video. Make sure you guys check this out on YouTube as well. Noel Gallagher basically goes on to all of like various social media sites as himself and answers fan questions. And one of the people asked him like, what does it mean, slowly walking down the hall faster than a cannonball? And he said, well, I don't know what it means. Yeah. But 10,000 people sing it back to me every night, so it must mean something to them. Yeah. But like, you know, to me, there are certain songs and certain lyrics that kind of like they don't make sense. But then at the same time, sort of looking back again, it's the same sort of thing, isn't it? You push the envelope in what makes sense and what works and what what logically makes sense, and then after you push it, that's been done, and then it becomes more acceptable again.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think with lyrics, I think it depends on how the person likes to write, I guess. But there's like, how do I say this? Yeah, I guess there's sort of like the obscurity sort of factor where you just literally have no idea what they're talking about, or what they're talking about can be interpreted in different ways, and I guess the artist isn't obligated to have to reveal what they're talking about.
No, it almost becomes like part of the mystery and part of the fun of listening to it as well. So having a debate with what it means and stuff like that.
Yeah, like once you put something out, it's there, you know, like no matter what your intent. And I think I was reading an interview between Phoebe Bridgers and Matt Berninger recently, literally just about their lyrics. I think it came out a couple of days ago.
Check that out as well if you get a chance, guys.
Yeah, and they were talking about how they just sort of their lyric writing processes. They just write things out and then put them together, and sometimes they might not even be real. They talk about this line. I was carried on the arms of cheerleaders, which is one of his the lyrics from Mr. November by The National, and he was like, "Were you actually carried on the arms of cheerleaders as a kid?" And he was like, "No, I was kind of crap at baseball." And this never happened, but it was just more of like a nostalgic thing. He just wrote it down, and it's a thought, you know. The whole Kanye thing is like it's just a thought, and
it's just
you put it on paper. You see what happens when you read it back to yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, that's this bit sort of like deep songwriting thing, but I guess if you're pushing the boundaries of meaning, I guess, and going too far in terms of meaning, then it's like, it's like. Maybe it's realism, maybe it's just incomprehensiveness, or maybe it's just obscurity. Like, does this make any sense at all?
Yeah, exactly.
My friend sent me this lyric from Interpol, the band Interpol, and he the lyric reads, I don't actually know the original song, but the lyricist Paul Banks, it says, "My friend's a butcher, he has 16 knives. He carries them all over the town, at least he tries. Oh look, it stopped snowing." And it's like, and apparently that's one of their best songs. Anyway.
But like, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because at the same time, I think the logical sort of progression of idea songwriting, like it has been done now You know, and you can do it better than anyone else in the world, but you're still doing something that's been done before. Whereas if you are just sort of grabbing these randomly associated words and thoughts, it does become a really interesting way of writing songs. I remember listening to the classic album series on Amazon Prime that you very kindly recommended to me.
You've been watching that?
Of course. I do. I follow your recommendations. But it was it was Paul Simon's Graceland, and he was talking about. Of course, it was Paul Simon's Graceland. But he was talking about how he wrote "Call Me Out" or "You Can Call Me Out," which is obviously one of the songs he's very well known for. And he was saying that a load of that was literally just random word association. You know, you have like bone digger, dogs in the moonlight. You know, dog, bone. He literally just. He was saying like a lot of it means very little.
It's like Bon Iver. Like he's written some out there lyrics and just no one knows what they mean.
Yeah,
I don't even know.
Staring at the sink of blood and crushed veneer. Like every time I cover that song every now and again. And every time I do, I'm just sort of like I'm trying to work it out in my head. And just, what is it? I think that as another point. This really interesting was is writing like in another language as well.
I was literally going to just bring that up.
We're going to do it as well.
and there is a case for something going maybe too far, or is it too far? Like there's an act called Baby Metal right now that's out. I don't know if you heard of them, but
I haven't. No.
If you haven't, I will describe them to you. They are 3, I think now 2, sort of. It's a completely manufactured K rock band, but they've got like these 3 like really like just like K-pop sort of type of stars, but they're dressed in like this sort of gothic dress thing. That's like their shtick, and they do these dances, and they're singing occasionally in English, but mostly in Korean. And then they've got like an extreme metal band as the backing band, and they've headlined like massive festivals. And they headlined like, was it Sonosphere or Download or something like that? They're a proper heavy band, but they're at the front. They're just like singing these like K-pop lyrics, and occasionally it goes into English, and it's like, is that going too far? Or is that like people are digging it?
That's the thing, isn't it? If people like it, I was.
That's more than the language thing, I guess.
I had a really interesting conversation on the language point when I was. So I lived in. For people who don't know, I lived in Berlin for a year as part of my university degree. And I played music with quite a few people over there. And I was chatting to a guy who wrote for, it was like a heavy metal German band. Just that they were an unsigned indie band who just played around clubs in Berlin and Dresden. And they wrote in English. And I remember I'd asked them, like, why do you write in English? Because obviously they spoke German, but they said it's easier to write in a foreign language because the words don't have the same cultural baggage, I suppose. Okay. You know, if you like, I don't know if there are any people listening who speak another language, but like if you learn, like, pick a word, like, I don't know, like love, for example, like obviously love in English, if you've grown up listening to that word, it has a certain meaning. So when you hear the word love, you have all these, you know, love stories, love songs, you know.
It's for the
yeah, exactly. You know, like it's embedded into the culture, and so you have a deeper sort of feeling of what the word means. If you translate it literally, you have the word Liebe, die Liebe in German, and in Germany and Austria and Switzerland and everywhere else that speaks German as well. But learning another language, it doesn't carry the same sort of, at least to me, it takes a while for the meaning of the word to sink in. So you can write a song in another language, use all the translated words, but it doesn't necessarily, it's lighter, at least in terms of what you're writing. So there's a freedom, you know, and an experimentation, because you don't have the same linguistic constraints that you have in another language, I guess. So like if you were someone who was...
And I was just going to mention that even just sometimes the words, they sound more singable or less singable. Like in Cantonese, like love is ngoi. And I feel like that's just a much uglier sound than like love.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a cultural thing that I've heard people be like, love, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas
they have that whole like...
If I was going to be like, ngoi, it's just like, it's just kind of like, that is cantopop, I guess. But it's less of I guess if Cantonese was the only language you speak, then that is your word. You know, you're stuck with that word.
Yeah, exactly. It's like to pick another example. Like if you have like like matchstick, like little matchstick is quite a nice phrase, to have in, little matchstick, like that's a little donkey from the Christmas song, not a Christmas song, the Christmas Carol, but like in German it's Streichelschächtelchen, which doesn't roll off the tongue in the same way.
Oh God. Yeah.
At all, literal translation, or like the famous one is like butterfly, which is like farfalla in Italian, but then it's like Schmetterling in German, which I don't think sounds that bad, but like obviously it sounds heavier than what a butterfly is, and so like certain words in certain languages carry different meanings, and they have just sonically they sound in certain contexts they're more appropriate perhaps to use.
Maybe the challenge is to find these ugly words and make them sound nice.
Maybe that's what you have to do. You have to sing them in a nicer way.
But it's interesting, I guess. It is very much its own factor. Like you can just completely ignore it if you wanted and just focus on certain parts of the music. But you can also like take that into account and be like, this is going too far, this sucks, or like that. Exactly. But I feel like we've gotten very sort of this has been a pretty hardcore episode. This has been I've really enjoyed this one. I mean, I salute you if you've gotten this far, but we have pretty much non-stop gone into music and how we listen to it, I guess. Many a tangent has been been followed. Which is ultimately, I feel like we could have gone even deeper as well. We were holding back a bit just to make sure we cover more points. But it's there's so much to talk about and a lot to make sense of and generalize in terms of the music we listen to. Definitely. But I guess what is the sort of what is the outcome that we want to get out of this? I feel like I have an idea, but I'm quite interested. Like in terms of your own personal opinion or my own personal opinion of what it means to go too far and to challenge the boundaries. I think I think calling something bad for going too far, I think, is something that's quite a prejudgmental thing to do. It's very easy to, because I think a lot of people have a knee-jerk reaction to most music that you listen to. I think one of the wonderful things about music is that it's very hard not to have an opinion about it, because it lights up so many different spheres in your brain, orally, like emotionally, physically, in terms of like the rhythm in it. Like there are so many different aspects that it hits you in that you can't really you gotta go like, oh, that did nothing for me at all. Like it hits you somewhere. And so I think you have visceral and sort of guttural reaction to certain things, but then I think at the same time it's almost worth thinking, like not second guessing, but sort of like taking a deeper look at why you think an artist has gone too far, and then maybe sort of then you can at least understand it in a slightly wider context. I think personally I would say that I don't think artists can necessarily go too far, because they're doing what they think is, they're doing what they want to do, and so like if to them they're not going too far, then who's anybody else to tell them? But I think obviously that's that's a very sort of what's the word, like decontextualized view of things. I think obviously if enough people say that someone's gone too far in a certain way, then and it becomes conventional wisdom, then that's all enough to justify people then saying, oh, that person's gone too far. And the same with taste. Enough people say I don't like that, then eventually people are going, oh yeah, okay, I don't like that either. That's the popular opinion to have. You can obviously go against that and say, oh no, I do like that. But it sinks into it sort of sinks under the point where it's up for debate almost. Like it just becomes like a kind of like conventionally assumed idea that a certain band is bad or a certain band has gone too far or sort of good or bad. But that's my opinion, I think, is that like and it's not an opinion that I I'm not it's not something I'm always able to uphold. Like, there are some things that I listen to and like straight away I'm just like I'm not in the mood to listen to that right now, or like that's not going to do anything for me.
so like I need to sort of take a dose of my own medicine at times and sort of live by the words that I'm speaking now a little bit more. But yeah, I think at least right now I don't think I don't think an artist can go too far. At least in a pure sense of like pushing the boundaries of things. What conclusion? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, just to bounce off that, I feel like there's also needs to be space for music to be disliked as well.
Yes,
I need to think about that a bit more, just in my personal life experience, to get all like philosophical. But yeah, there also needs to be a place for disliking music, because without it, it's like you can't judge anything. But I think what I'm most excited about, because as a mass consumer of music, is the way that unconventional things that go too far, things that push the boundary, everything we've talked about here, the way it does in terms of what people are listening to. And it's almost like you got to trick people into listening to it. Maybe not trick people, but you got to find a way that the key is finding success with it. Okay, maybe it isn't the key. Maybe that's the wrong way to put it. But because things can become like, okay, this was not a thing at the time, but now it's groundbreaking because we brought it back. But I'm quite interested to see what makes it into the mainstream, or makes it into a community of listeners, and the ways that new sounds and new things, like people listening to new music, that like what to them makes it like, if because there are albums where you listen to it and you're like, damn, that was innovative. Like the gut reaction is like,
yes,
like Taylor Swift, or like when people first listen to Billie Eilish, and the gut, or the new record that came out last year, When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go? People were literally like, wow, this is the future of pop music, because it's like, it's different from like anything that's been released before, and that's like the most successful album of last year, probably.
Yeah.
So I'm quite interested to see when those instances happen, when those innovative things break into the pop mainstream at that moment. I think that's
definitely.
Yeah. Whereas we can always look in hindsight and be like, okay, that was very, very innovative, and maybe they deserved more success at the time because of how groundbreaking it was. I mean,
exactly.
Groundbreakingness and success, maybe they don't go hand in hand. Sometimes
no,
they do,
certainly not.
They don't correlate with each other.
No, they're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, I'm loving all the hand motions.
I'm loving it. This is great. This is great. Bait for the YouTube videos, guys. There are lots of hand gestures on this podcast.
There's like quintuplet swing. What was it again? There's like
that's philosophy, is waving your hands up and down.
There is what would I just say? Like things like success and innovativeness.
Mutually exclusive. It's two turtles in the air, debating with each other. I think that might be quite a cool place to sort of draw it to a close. And I guess like to end with some sort of questions, like what do you guys think is going too far in music? Like, do you guys agree? Like, can you go too far in music? Do you think there's a place that certain artists have gone too far? And I guess also like, what do you guys think the next thing that is going to go too far will be? I know obviously it's impossible to say, but like, what do you think the next thing that like might be, that everyone kind of has that visceral reaction of, oh, it's gone too far, or like it's not acceptable, at least in terms of common wisdom, that will then obviously potentially find its way into common knowledge as well.
Yeah, basically send us some crazy music on Instagram and Twitter.
Exactly. Yeah.
Email
whatever you guys.
us.
Yeah.
Message it to us. Do it.
I've got a crazy appetite for new music. Since starting this podcast, actually, like I've been so much more willing to listen to more new music as well. Like it's just it's a muscle that I haven't exercised in a really long time, and so it's really nice. Like if you guys have some suggestions, please send it over. I'll be more than willing to consume
We will listen to it and we will talk.
We will listen to it and we will talk about it. Exactly.
We will. This has been intense, man. We should bring the games back.
Yeah, games next week, definitely.
Games. We're gonna have more fun stuff.
Yeah, we're gonna have more games. We're gonna have
Serious.
theme tunes for the games as well, and they're gonna be absolutely fantastic.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Sonic Bytes. If you liked what you heard, give us a like or follow us on Spotify, Anchor FM, or wherever you get your podcasts. And leave us a comment at YouTube at Leo Kelly G Music, Instagram at Sonic Bytes, and Twitter at Sonic Bytes Pod. We'll have a new episode coming soon, so stay tuned. Is that okay?